Okay, it is 9:03 and we'll commence today's January 7th Land Use Committee meeting. We have with us from DCD Nick Carey, and then from Council we have Fred, Beck, and myself, Scott. First item up for discussion is tax abatement zones. And we have, I see, communication from Steve Wright about his concerns, which are understandable, about the funding mechanisms. So,
sure. And so maybe the council members here can fill me in a little bit more on the discussion that took place on the last council meeting of December, because I was not able to attend due to the tornado. And it sounds like that was tabled, but there was some discussion about what we want to do with this going forward, whether we want to consider this individual request or whether we want to only do a more comprehensive look at tax abatement as a policy.
And just for the record, I wasn't there either, so I missed out on that discussion. So.
What I remember from the discussion is exactly what you just said, Nick. Mm-hmm. And it was simply a statement, I think, by Councilman Cacciardi, and he just felt that we needed to review both, and so we took it to a work study where we could have a more in-depth discussion. The applicant or the developer, a representative, was in the office, and he was supportive of waiting until you were here. I had expressed that I would like to have an interaction with you before we made a decision. And so everyone was supportive of waiting until you came, till you got back.
Sure. So I guess with the going back, I think, to our November work study meeting when we brought forward sort of two alternatives. One was to tweak our overall ordinance so that there was only 12-year abatement downtown and go to 8-year everywhere else and expand it to this one property. I think the other alternative was the other alternative we considered at that meeting was just adding this property to the existing framework with no changes, and so the preference was to bring forward an ordinance that actually got rid of 12-year abatement as sort of an interim step towards doing something more comprehensive. As far as doing something more comprehensive, I agree it needs to be looked at, but I think we're looking at a several-month probably process to go through this. And from what I've heard from various council members and what they've said publicly at our meetings, I'm not sure that we have consensus on why we have tax abatement. And I think that certain council members may see it as a way to develop local centers. Others may see it as a tool for providing affordable housing. And whether there's other objectives such as downtown redevelopment. I'm not really clear on why we want tax abatement and how to design a system that will accomplish sort of our goal for tax abatement. I think it's a tool that can be used in a variety of ways, and so I really think that's where the discussion needs to start. and then I think the real question is: do we deal with this one request before we do a comprehensive review or not? And what is the impact of not doing something on that project? Is it going to?
Well, I had a minority opinion, which I stated, and you may or may not have heard, which was that I felt the Sedgwick property did not need to be included in the tax abatement because it was a very desirable location. It was outside downtown, and I supported tax abatement to try to encourage development downtown because there are challenges there. And I felt that if we extended this to anywhere in the city for any apartment, it really diluted that effect. So that was my reservation. I also was concerned, and I think Sean touched on it in a different way, that unless we had some sort of standards, it sounded like anyone would figure they should ask to be included because they had nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. And they would be able to save 8 to 12 years worth of their property tax.
Sure.
So I don't know that we're in the same boat as the other cities where all of their apartments are eligible for this. I know that Bremerton's done it, I think you're saying. But on the other hand, Gig Harbor is almost the opposite, where they either have a moratorium or they probably don't have abatement.
Yeah, they certainly don't have any abatement, and there's no shortage of people that want to build apartments in Gig
Yeah.
Harbor.
So we're in between Gig Harbor and Bremerton. I mean, geographically speaking, not demographic, but so.
And probably 8 to 12 years behind in terms of development patterns and things that are happening here that have happened there as well.
In Gig Harbor, not necessarily Bremerton,
Yeah.
except
yeah,
the downtown area.
Yeah.
I have several different thoughts on the abatement. I remember when we first had the conversation, one of the questions I asked, and then I did not follow up with it, is what were the rental amounts in Port Orchard?
Correct.
And we didn't follow up on it at that time, and no one had researched that. And since that time, we have found out that most of our rentals fall into the affordable housing category already. So by doing this, we're not creating more. That's already being built.
Sure.
So that was one of the pieces that I wanted to look at. With that knowledge, then you're just, no matter where they want to build, you're giving them free real estate taxes.
Sure.
Because they're going to build with those parameters anyway. My other concern is, and this is just because I'm a money person, is when you build an apartment building like that, you are putting stress on the schools, because I would imagine that there would be children involved in living in there. And you're also providing additional work for the fire department. Let's just take the property in question on Sedgwick right now. That's just empty land. So what is the expense of the fire department to go there and, do some work? So what we have is we have impact fees that are one-time sources of revenue that would help the city with infrastructure needs, with road needs and other things, and help the school district perhaps build more classrooms. But that doesn't do anything for the ongoing maintenance of that property. And we're providing additional work for the fire department, but no source of revenue to offset that. So that's something that I think we should consider.
Okay. So essentially, Steve's concerned.
So along what you mentioned about what is the current rent in Port Orchard, and since we've looked at it,
Right.
and we're the new apartments up, the new Overlook apartments, I think they're asking $1,500 a month for the big one, and the less for a smaller unit. I'm just looking at listings in Port Orchard, I find $1,000 to $1,200 pretty typical for a one or a 2-bedroom apartment. But one of the things that has occurred to me since we started this is that the statistical areas that we use for calculating median income is Bremerton Silverdale. And I suspect that
Ours is
our smaller sub area within that Bremerton Silverdale, I don't know whether it's a census or a HUD data area, I would suspect that we're on the lower end of that, and that it's being skewed higher because there are more affluent people in Central and Kitsap and Silverdale, and so potentially that 80 to 120% of median income, when it's a Silverdale median income, really ought to be set lower to reflect local Port Orchard conditions if our goal is providing affordable housing. But whether we have any data to use alternative to the Bremerton Silverdale, I don't know whether that exists, but we could certainly look at adjusting that range to like a 60 to 80% range.
Oh, we could adjust the range.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that developers are actually having to work to get the tax abatement as opposed to just getting a
freebie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I should also point out to you guys that I have a meeting has been requested with me with somebody else on Sedgwick who wants to talk about tax abatement. So the potential that somebody else, and that's the Glen Mora project off of Bravo Terrace.
Okay.
which is like 300 or 400 apartment units
Right.
that they want down there.
The traffic nightmare.
Well, the traffic nightmare that they can't afford to solve because of how much it's going to cost.
It's a $1.2 million roundabout if they built it for us.
Where is that?
It's behind.
Sherry's?
So you would
Dairy
it would
Queen?
be behind the bank and behind the hotel.
Exit.
There's so you would end
Okay.
you end up Bravo Terrace. You would access it actually where the mobile home. There's a cul-de-sac where the mobile home sales is, and then they would continue that road back in there. There's some wetlands.
Right.
But beyond that is developable land behind the wetlands.
How much is the new
Doesn't
freeway?
it go up over the hill?
I'll show you where it's at. It's also this Ives Mill property. Don't laugh at my desktop. This projects at a different ratio than my other one, and it just throws everything on there.
I'll have to remember that.
It makes mine look a lot better.
All right, so
And I guess this just. So I'm sorry, I was in Silverdale for Housing Kitsap meeting this morning.
it's these two big properties.
We need. I think if we're gonna do this and amend this, it needs to be. We need to have criteria, because otherwise everybody's.
What I'm
Yeah.
going to say about the Sedgwick area is I don't know that we've had difficulty developing that land. And I think when the fast ferry goes in, I think there will be more activity in that area. And do we want to give away, I mean, how much do we want to incentivize properties that will already have some incentive with them?
Sure.
Well, and if it's one thing for the developer to say, "Hey, my project doesn't pencil,"
Right.
but to quantify that.
Correct.
Is there? Do we have a process that would, this Glenmora project? I mean, I personally know because I managed a bank that there's a at 5 years ago's costs a $1.5 million, $1.2 million, probably 1.5 now, $1 million roundabout. Well, show me that these are your development costs, and this is why it doesn't pencil, because the traffic improvements that you're going to be required to do.
But and I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that. I'm thinking even if you did put in a roundabout there, it's still going to be a traffic nightmare.
Yeah, there's
With
volume
300
issues.
more,
There's volume issues.
But that's
Yeah.
a state issue, not
Yeah.
a city
Okay.
issue.
Yeah, and we can't put that on the developer.
So the other thing that
You also have access to that off Geiger, don't you?
No.
you do, but it's
Here?
right in, right out for the plan.
Yeah.
So
But coming off Bethel, I remember when we rezoned those properties to make them multifamily. It
Right.
seems to me there was access off of Bethel.
yeah, you can come off of.
You have to
Farag
build the road.
and build. You're going to have to improve these roads, and,
Okay,
It's back.
and those are county roads, and so
It's
that
Ives
involves.
Mills. It's right here.
Well, Ives Mills goes through as well as Cedar to Farag.
right.
Okay.
So the other thing that we've talked about previously is looking at sort of a property tax assessed value per acre, and
Correct.
when we look at what was built over here, these Sinclair apartments, they've got a couple of parcels that they basically put all their wetlands on one track, and so you have a pretty good idea. They built I forget the size of the site, but it's a $4.4 million assessed valuation for their buildings. And if you look at how much investment per acre they're making, giving tax abatement, if they were willing to build a $7 million per acre project compared to a $4 million per acre project, 8 years down the road is going to create sort of a win-win situation for the city and the developer, because they're going to have more units per acre. We're not going to be any worse off in terms of tax revenue. It's just a matter of the timing of that tax revenue. And so that was one of the other things that I thought would be worth exploring.
Right.
Would be legally, can we impose a condition that says that they will grant this provided that they build at a certain building assessed value per acre, and say that it's assign a dollar amount per acre to their project above what the market is currently producing. And so in that way we're creating value where there is
Better housing.
Yeah, it's either higher quality housing, or because we're giving them a benefit, they're potentially going up higher than they otherwise would, based on elevator costs and parking, underground or garage type parking.
Do you know if that's been approached anywhere else?
I do not believe it has.
I like it. I guess this just comes
Yeah,
back
no,
to
it goes back to your criteria.
Criteria.
I
How
don't
do
know
we-
that this, from my point of view, it's difficult for me, for the city to say, your profit margin needs to be a certain percentage. Because when you take their development costs off, or you add your development costs, then they're adding a certain percentage for their profit, and that's their total cost. So, if we're saying it doesn't pencil, well, it doesn't pencil because of the amount of profit they want. So I don't know, it's up to us to
be analyzing their profit margin.
correct.
Right.
So our criteria to me needs to be something other than that.
And what I think is important to look at with the Sinclair and the Sedgwick apartments is that these things penciled without incentives at
Correct.
this level of development, though they didn't have to make significant intersection improvements. I believe they had to put in a turn lane on, I think there's a turn lane here on Sedgwick where it was just widened, and then they put in their frontage improvements. They did not have to build a roundabout or a signal, and that project penciled at that type of density. So I guess it's just important to keep that in mind
Right.
as we step this.
I guess I could keep coming. How do we establish criteria? And I think the one is, I think it's, in my opinion at least, a no-brainer is the affordable housing component for the 12 years. We need to be stricter in that criteria, and truly, versus giving an extra 4 years. Our community's gaining something for those 4 years, which is truly the developers subsidizing affordable housing. I think that's, otherwise we're giving away 4 more years. Other than they have to monitor and track it.
Which I just went to this affordable housing task force out at Alderbrook on Thursday of last week, and all of the other jurisdictions were there said that they're not having anybody take 12-year abatement because of the risk associated with tracking it, and if they slip up, they got to pay everything back. So 12-year abatement is not as attractive as the 8-year abatement. Though we've had one project take 12-year abatement, and they're going to have to stay on top of things. And
So that takes me back to your original question, Nick, and that is, what is our intent with the abatement? What is the city's goal? Is it to create redevelopment? Because originally that's what I thought. That was kind of my point of view for downtown and Up Mile Hill. It didn't go out into the areas west of Highway 16 or in that Sedgwick area, because we seem to have organic growth there without having to incentivize it. So that, to me, it goes back to what is our intent with this?
I think it was twofold in the beginning. One, with the 8-year, it was trying to put a tool in the toolbox to foster redevelopment or infill development
Right.
in areas that we were seeing challenged,
Right.
which we've had one success.
Right.
The second was we felt we didn't know, I don't think fully understand that the 12-year, that our market rates were within that percentage.
Right.
And so I don't know that was, at least in my mind, our intent was to put an affordable housing component to work, and I don't believe that at the current percentages that's doing the job the way that we intended at the time. And so now that we've got developers saying, well, I'd like you to consider us too, and I just, if we're going to do that, what I hate to see is we do this one, and then the guys at Bravo Terrace, we have a subjective process.
Right.
We deny it, and then we end up in litigation because we aren't
Consistent?
we're consistent. We don't have a process to approve or deny these 8-year abatements. that we may or may not want to consider. Chief Wright is opposed. He loves the idea of shortening it all to 8 years. I've invited him to the work study. He was very thankful. The night of the tornado, he was on site and fully intended to be at our council meeting, and he will be at the work study. But his point of view is, he really doesn't want any abatement, and he encourages us to shorten or make it more stringent. Is going to be his position. I can guarantee you that.
One thing, and I don't know if we've touched on it, is I've heard from some council members, not here, that there's the sense that we already have more than our share of affordable housing in the county. I don't know if I'm expressing that right, but it's like is that something that they feel we need to focus on?
We do have our share. That's for sure. There's less of it on Bainbridge Island and in Paulsbo than there is in Port Orchard, Bremerton, and even CK has some.
Well, and based on the 80 to 120% of median income, I'd say that we have our fair share of low-income housing because our fair market rent is below what is truly considered affordable.
Correct. And there's a distinction there.
I was gonna go there. There's a distinction too between housing the Kitsap's subsidized housing and the affordable housing component that we're trying to create.
Right.
HUD vouchers and Section 8 programs are helping a different rung on the ladder than what we're trying to achieve here.
Okay.
This is probably workforce housing. Folks making just above minimum wage. In today's market, it's tough for them to buy a home or to afford rents on these on the newer places.
So what are you looking for?
Well, I guess I need to know, are we taking this back to work study in January? Is that the idea at this point? So I guess, does this committee have a recommendation?
The other thing I'm going to say is at our council meeting when we said we would take it back to work study, that was to accommodate your schedule because we didn't think, because of the holidays, that you would be prepared for tomorrow night. But we also were going to notice that we would take action at that work study.
Or might.
That's true. We could take action.
I mean, I don't, is 1 week really going to make that much difference?
Well, they wanted it to take action tomorrow night, and I said that's not realistic.
Gotcha.
And I said we need to have a land use committee meeting and potentially a work study. It's nothing to say that this committee makes a recommendation and you make and there's further work that comes from the work study and we delay this, but.
Right, and again, there was a representative from the developer there, and he let us know that their project was time sensitive, and so we needed to take some kind of action fairly soon.
Well,
for
said,
his
yeah.
question, yeah.
a week won't make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, if we need to notice something, I don't know what the deadline is for putting an action item on work study.
Well, we had an action item, and I don't want to say continued it. It wasn't. That's the wrong term, but the action, we already noticed it, and we've moved it to a date certain.
Gotcha.
So I don't believe we have any new notice requirements because
Okay, I'll talk to Brandy and make sure that we're on the
we
same
just
page.
moved the item that was there to a date certain.
Okay, and so as far as this committee's recommendation, I mean, that's a specific proposal that you have before you. I mean, is this committee inclined to support that, or are you wanting to take a more detailed look at it rather than taking any action at this point?
I don't think until we develop criteria and sort through this better that I'm inclined to support it.
Okay.
I don't know about.
Yeah, I have difficulty with one-offs.
Mm-hmm.
To me, if we're going to do it, we need definitions and perhaps tweak what we've done. Now that we've are into this further and have studied it further, we have very good intent to start with. But
Okay, so I think
Do you have enough idea in the way of ideas to create criteria. I like your idea of minimum values to get the abatement.
Or a certain
on the
density,
eight,
or-
particular on the 8
If you
year.
can.
Yeah, I think that we can get there. I think there's a legal question we need to give to our attorney to make sure that we can add those types of criteria to granting abatement. I think that
Do we want
we
this-
need
those two-
council to decide whether this is an affordable housing policy or simply an urban centers policy. And is our goal to find a way to provide an incentive for affordable housing or not?
I think it needs to be both, in my opinion. I think the 12 years, the affordable housing piece, and we have something that's maybe working. I don't know that we can. Downtown and up Mile Hill are still more challenging.
Correct.
If we're going to expand the area, I think then maybe it's got this value tool added to this expanded area that is greenfield development, which should be costing less. That'd be my 2 cents. Downtown is going to be with its structured parking and who knows what you're going to find in the ground. There's going to be
Well, and
challenges.
you're going to get that value per acre downtown anyway, I think, because of providing parking.
Okay.
And you're going to get an intensity of development downtown that you're not going to see on Sedgwick necessarily.
Okay, but that's what we want to see. I think if we're going to get, does others think that way or not? That we're trying to get that more intense development because it's in our center, or not?
Well, and we have several defined centers, but,
Yeah.
but the McCormick Woods Center, I don't think needs to be incentivized. So how do you choose which centers?
It's for you guys to decide
Yeah.
where do
we want to focus on?
where do we want to focus this more intense development that's going to be transit oriented. We're going to try to make it more walkable because there's services to walk to. And I think Sedgwick has some of that criteria. Bethel probably does too. Sedgwick and Sydney. It's creating that walkability and there's services there if there's housing.
So
That one seems like a bit of a different animal.
Which one is this?
Sedgwick and Sydney, in that it is so built out.
Well, one piece of it is, one corner of it is, or two corners.
Two corners, yeah.
Yeah, but that whole area, you can't look at it at just the intersection. Look at what's with Stetson Heights and everything else that's going on there.
To build out, to connect those things and
Yeah.
to go build out down Sydney to the north.
Right. My personal thing is I'm not inclined to do a one-off for this particular
Right.
property. I want something a little more overarching. And I also think that what we did initially, I think we focused on the areas of town that are challenged. So if we're going to expand beyond that, I need some good reasons to do that.
The developer over by Fred Meyer, do they own that property?
I believe they have not closed on it yet.
Okay.
It's this is still the
Okay.
previous owner. So yeah, I assume they're in a feasibility period where they have to make a decision in a pretty short timeline.
So they should get an answer.
Maybe. That sounds it.
Okay. Do you have what you need?
Yeah, I think the discussion at council. I think we need to have a discussion about what are the entire council's goals. What are we trying to accomplish with this program?
Right.
And then
Maybe
go back
let's-
to the drawing board to establish criteria for when to grant this, and then determine where. Are we going to wait for requests to come in, or are we going to designate our centers for this with some minimum threshold for?
Some of our
investors?
centers.
Right.
I'd heard that some of our centers this may not be appropriate for.
Sure.
The tax abatement part, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. The second
Sounds
item
good.
was a request by Earl Dow to look at the city sponsoring an amendment?
Yeah, we've talked about this before, going back a couple of years. So in the last comprehensive plan amendment, let me pull up
Didn't we rezone him once?
we gave them the properties along Old Clifton. We changed from industrial to
Multifamily.
multifamily because of the stream that runs through this area here. All of these properties back here are still zoned industrial, and he does not have access because this is a private road over here. That the private road is for single-family use only. It does not have a commercial type access. So all these properties are landlocked. He owns a patchwork of them, along with this guy William Brown, and I believe one other owner. And William Brown is not willing. He said that if the city does it, he doesn't really care, but he's not seeking a change in designation. Errol Dow would like it changed.
To what?
I believe single family. Yeah, residential, because that's the only thing he has access to back there, unless the city improves something with its property here, which involves significant grading, and we talked to the quarry about expanding their operation at some point.
That's the long-term plan.
It is, and basically Errol, his feeling is that he's not going to be around to see that plan. I think he's about 80 years old now, and he's trying to do something with this property sooner than that. So, I guess the question
Where's the
Access.
access from Anderson Hill?
Let me see if I can see it on the aerial photo. It's an easement here. It might be this road, and then I think there's an easement that comes up, possibly. It looks like there's a little bit of a road back here. It's hard to say, but I think it comes in off of...
Yeah, I don't think that's a road back there. I think that's
I think it's an easement, and that they got a ravine there.
yeah. There's a ravine.
It's a residential street though over here, right to the
This
south,
one?
north,
Where's Hanson's Road?
up there to the north.
Yeah, maybe it's Hanson Road.
Could be Hanson.
It's Hanson Road. Okay.
Well, Hanson Road goes up to the city property. That's the city one. In any event,
Okay.
he has a recorded easement from one of these, but it can only be single-family use.
There's our reservoir.
Yes. I'm trying to think where the road is that's going to go through there.
You know, one of my concerns here is we zone this even single family. We have a gun range right here.
Well, the question.
Notice the title.
The question isn't. The question is the city going to sponsor it? Because Mr. Dow can't get his neighbors to go with him.
Correct, and we likely wouldn't approve a patchwork where, this lot and this lot, oh, not that one, not that one, but then I think these
Right.
two, so it would be a patchwork of
Right.
single family and
So
Errol proposed it.
the question right now isn't, do we want to make the comprehensive plan change? It's, does the city want to be the sponsor of it?
Yeah.
And I'm not.
I have a problem with step 2, but do we want to do
Yeah.
do we want to pay for step 1?
So we told them we would bring it,
Yeah.
we would ask whether the council had any interest in pursuing this right now, and sounds like this committee doesn't. I don't know if that's a question for the full council or whether it just dies at this committee.
I know he presented this before, and Mark spoke against it.
Mark,
Dorsey.
why?
Just that our long-term plan is to sell the quarry mining rights and to develop the commercial parcels, at which then he would have access from the city roads. His rub is he's getting up in age, and he doesn't want to wait for us. I don't know that we control what investments he made when and
Yeah.
whether or not.
Right.
Yeah, and it seems to me that we looked at the possibility of trying to subdivide the city property, and it's, we're not developers. It's not an easy thing for us to take on. It seems to me that maybe a better approach would be to identify what pieces we need out of that, and then, look to partner with somebody.
Yeah, we're gonna. That's the long term plan. Is that? Yeah, it's the quarry. The folks from the quarry. We're not taking on any new projects right now. We're finishing what we have, and it could be 3 to 5 years before this gets serious traction and we start a design, and then from there, then it's a partner. Yeah, I think we've got to design it and short plot it first, and then looking for a development partner. So it's realistically 5 or 10 years out in the future. I have reservations though putting residences up against our industrial area and a gun range.
Is there a name on that easement down there?
The road, this road?
Yeah.
Durfee?
Durfee?
Lane.
Okay, I think you would be hard pressed to find it if you go out there.
That very well may be the case. But that doesn't mean that they don't have the right to improve
That's
it.
correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
But it is, we've heard it's restricted. The neighbors there gave him an easement as long as he only built single family dwellings and
Correct.
not commercial property, which is appropriate for that
There it
neighborhood.
is.
It's a nice lane.
It's your call.
Well, the other thing to consider is our industrial land supply and how important that is to us as well. I mean, we've got the issues with mini storages and where they can go, and so that might be worth talking about if we wanted to pursue this more.
I would have I would look at it differently if he were bringing it to us. But for us to sponsor it, other questions come to mind.
So he's still free to submit his application or to talk his neighbors into it. And it sounds like his neighbors aren't willing, but if his neighbors were willing, I think that's more favorable than, if it's a patchwork, certainly. But I don't think it doesn't sound like, there's a ton of support for changing it right now.
If his neighbors are willing, then he's willing to pay for it and apply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, we're adjourned. 10 after 10.